All right.
Just gonna let the countdown. Let's do it. Shout out to Stuart who's in the studio right now. Who's got us going. About to go on. See if you can see us. Stream text me. Bam. WRFULP about 104.5 FM. Just waiting for Stuart Levy who's in the studio working the scenes behind all the technical issues. Who's connecting us? Hopefully we'll start the broadcast shortly. Put my phone on silent. For once, everything is working smoothly. It only took a few $1,000s. That's all.
Oh shit! Hold on 1 second. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Sorry to all the folks out there who are tuning in who heard that. May have heard that. WRFULP about 104.5 FM. A little too early in the day for that. Is this also recording?
I'm back. I just had to make sure I didn't lock my family out.
Okay, 1 second. We're still waiting for Stuart to text him. Sound is faint. Well, we'll get the sound going just right. Don't worry about that, Stuart. If the studio's connected, give me another. But I hear you say something. What about now, Stuart? Can you hear us? Can you hear us clearly?
Hello?
Yeah, you're good. You're good, Donald. But I hear you say something. Okay. WRFULP about 104.5 FM. Mic check, mic check, mic check. Just checking all the vocals, making sure everything sounds smooth. Can you dig it? Stuart, can you hear us out there in Radio Land? Let's do a quick mic check for you, Donald.
Check, check. 1 2 1 2.
Okay, keep going. Say one more time.
Check, 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 check.
Perfect. Sounds good. A little clear on the faint side, but clear. Okay, we'll just turn up three dBs on your end, Stuart, and then we'll have to keep the levels clear on my side. So, okie dokie. Let's see with the countdown. WRFULP about 104.5 FM. This is a show. WRFU is an open forum with the Champaign and Commander community. The views expressed are those of the speakers and not intended to represent WRFU, CMC, Urbana Social Forum, Airshifters, UPTV, and anyone else. These thoughts and these words are ours and ours alone. Greetings, everyone, and thank you for tuning in for a special edition of the show. Right now, we're going to go in and have a live conversation with a special guest who's featured with us. Before I do, as always, you heard the legal disclaimer. We talk a lot of trash, but we always welcome any feedback you may have. You can always email us at wrfu@theshow1045.com, wrfu@theshow1045.com, or you can simply go to the website or to the Instagram and share your opinions. Tell me how foolish or idiotic you think I am. I'm never too good for criticism. But as it happens, I have a special guest on deck that I want to showcase on now. Tell them who you are. Tell them where you're coming from.
What's up? I'm Donald Sherman. I'm the Executive Vice President and Chief Counsel of Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington.
Fantastic. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to have turn up your sound a little bit because now that I hear it more clearly, it seems like you are a little bit lower. So put it on.
Okay.
Okay. We'll just have you talk louder during that. So we invited you on here to have a special conversation. You've had probably, if I would say, if not the one of the most momentous cases in the country to transpire in Colorado. To give folks a little bit of backdrop, you were initially, outside of being executive vice president as well as chief counsel, you brought a case beforehand that we had talked about a couple months ago when you had success in New Mexico, and we're initiating this process that you have undertaken currently. And for folks that don't remember, there was in reference to the 14th Amendment, and you can tell folks a little bit about that particular case, which I'm showing right now on the backdrop for folks who are seeing it now for the first time, or maybe for the second time if they were staying with us.
Yeah. So Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is a provision that was ratified in the aftermath of the Civil War, and it says No person can be a senator or representative in Congress or presidential elector, vice presidential elector, or hold any office, civil or military, under the United States or any under any state, if they've taken an oath to support the Constitution and then engage in insurrection or rebellion against the same. And in the aftermath of the January 6th attack on the Capitol, uh, the insurrection at the Capitol on January 6th, my organization crew has been looking at ways to use that provision of the Constitution to hold people accountable for engaging in that insurrection in violation of their oath. Last year, we represented 3 New Mexico residents and were successful in litigation to remove Coy Griffin, a Otero County, New Mexico commissioner, um, from office based on his role at the January 6th insurrection, including recruiting people to be violent, uh, really supercharging the crowd and encouraging them to be violent on January 6th. He breached the Capitol barriers and was on the Capitol grounds, but he did not enter the Capitol. Despite that, a judge in New Mexico found that he had engaged in insurrection. Consistent with a reading of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and the historical precedents related to its passage. And that brought us to September of this year when we brought the case on behalf of 4 Republican and 2 unaffiliated voters in Colorado, seeking to enforce Section 3 of the 14th Amendment against the former president and have the Secretary of State bar Donald Trump from the ballot based on his role in January 6th insurrection. You'll see here 2 of those clients are Norma Anderson, who's the former Colorado Senate Majority Leader, and Claudine Schneider Schmrada, who's a Republican member of Congress for a decade before relocating to Colorado in the last decade. And so we brought that case in district court in Denver, and we had a 5-day trial on October 30th. At the resolution of that trial, the district court found that Donald Trump had in fact engaged in insurrection, but that uh, Section 3 of the 14th Amendment did not apply to the office of the president or the presidency. We appealed that decision.
Can we just
Donald
stop right
Trump.
there? Was that first off? Did you when that decision came down? Were you surprised by that? What was your reaction to that? Because that for me was like that was like a really weird like you won but you didn't kind of thing. Like what was your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird. Obviously you lose, especially a high stakes case. It's a gut punch, and I think the first thing that I saw was a text from a colleague that said we lost, no context. And then you read the decision and you realize it's a 102-page decision. There are sort of lots and lots of legal and factual issues that we had to win in order to get Trump off the ballot. We won all but one of them, and so it's like 90 pages 1 through 97 are all like checking all the boxes. Okay, state law, you can bring this kind of claim under state law. Donald Trump engaged in insurrection. The First Amendment doesn't protect his conduct and his speech. And then they get to the last 5 pages, and the judge says, "But wait a minute, the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment doesn't apply to the president or the presidency." And so I think it was a little frustrating because I think that issue in particular we thought was we were pretty strong on that, but also we thought it was important that the judge really made the most significant finding, right? Which is a legal decision based on substantial amount of evidence that Donald Trump was an insurrectionist. And so you just like anytime you take a loss, you dust yourself off and you get ready for the next one. And we appealed pretty quickly, and we were able to prevail at the Colorado Supreme Court.
And for folks who were not paying attention, it was on December 14th that you had that decision come down, and of course that dictated that the one Donald Trump would not be, and I was literally banned from being on the ballot. He's literally not eligible to be on a state ballot at this juncture, right? And now that it's being appealed by his team in an effort to do so, and with that, they're now claiming that he should be eligible, and then they're asking for a stay as well as the decision from the Supreme Court. What was your reaction? How did you feel about that one? How was?
um,
I mean, you saw it
so
coming, right? It wasn't like a surprise. Oh, they're gonna.
No, I mean, it's interesting. We got to notice that morning that a decision was coming, and so then, there's a lump in your throat waiting for it to, waiting for it to drop. But like most working parents, you got to do your parent thing. So you pick the kids up, and making dinner or whatever. And then I got two texts. One from a colleague that said, "We won?" Question mark, I think, and then
You
one
think?
from another colleague that
What
said,
kind of
"We
friends you got,
won."
man? These are the worst. You gotta give
No, 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 I mean, it's funny
it.
because what happened was, uh, they released the decision, and it's like a one page with a link to the actual like opinion, and so
Which was voluminous.
like yeah, it was like 213 pages, and so you couldn't sort of click on the link early on, and then you got to like read through all the procedural stuff and everybody's names and whatnot, and then like you make sure you didn't skip over the right thing to finally
Yeah.
get to the place where it said that we won. And so I was much happier to like, also I was making dinner, but like it was much happier to have somebody tell me we won than to sort of go through that process of trying to read it myself. Um, and yeah, it was great for our clients, great for our team, great for Colorado, and great for democracy. And and so the former president has said that he's going to appeal. He hasn't actually appealed yet. The Colorado Supreme Court put a stay on their opinion until January 4th, in part because names of candidates have to go to the printer to print the ballot on January 5th. And so essentially, if Donald Trump appeals, he the decision will be stayed. But if he gets to January 4th and hasn't appealed, the stay is lifted and he'll be blocked from the ballot. So there's sort of a forcing mechanism to get him to appeal as opposed to running out the clock, which is one of the things that he might try to do or would have tried to do.
Which he's been an expert at. Even with the decision today with the Supreme Court now deciding not to rule on the immunity issue is something that he's been, allowing to go through the courts and to the DC circuit and having it go level by level and go upwards is excellent at, I would say, delay. The DIDA strategy, distract and delay, is something his team has been excellent at, which is why his bills are probably exorbitant and why his super PACs have been funding them like you would not believe. So,
Yeah, I mean, even in our process, I think we beat back four motions to dismiss, a remand action, which pulled the case into federal court, and then we won that and quickly got back to state court. But he tried every tool in the toolkit to keep us from getting a trial date and to delay that trial date, and we just sort of scratched and clawed to respond to his motions and to get to a trial. And Judge Wallace, to her credit, heard, set the trial and heard the evidence and sent a full record up to the Colorado Supreme Court. And so we were able to get this decision, and hopefully we're in a position to move forward quickly.
so you, in many ways, you've actually made history, right? Because you've kind of targeted a New Mexicant in Coy Griffin, who's now ineligible to run for office, and then you've also made a little bit of irony in that in Colorado, recreational cannabis is freely accessible, and yet in his recreational activities, Donald Trump can now currently not participate in running for any office. How does it feel to be the only one of the, I mean, I would say for the last two cases in the last century or so, to have represented clients and been successful? How does that feel?
Um, Look, it feels good. We feel vindicated. This is pretty hard work, and I think a lot of people are just sort of called this provision a long shot, called this litigation a long shot and cynical. Um, but democracy is hard work, and I'm grateful to the plaintiffs that we represent who are brave enough to sort of put their names out there,
Mm-hmm.
and really be the face of this litigation, both in New Mexico and now in Colorado. But also, look, we're either going to have a democracy or we're not. And if good people sit on the sidelines while Donald Trump tries to cancel the Constitution, we're not going to have one. And so, it's going to take a lot of people to step up, and take appropriate legal steps as necessary to prevent that from happening. And I'm just glad to be one of them, and even gladder that we have clients who are willing to risk as much as they have to do so, and sad that they have to.
Yeah. Like I was super happy for you, super proud. I've known you for quite some time, and I was like, yeah, that's my boy. was out there. But us talk about some of the upcoming issues. Do you expect, I should say, that individuals like Clarence Thomas, Supreme Court Justice, who's intertwined with January 6th, is likely to recuse himself despite the obvious overlap and the very clear concern of like that veil or that semblance of impartiality in the case with Guinea Thomas potentially, being directly implicated in January 6th and his insurrection acts, and his, I'm referring to Donald Trump's, being intertwined in that case, that he should remove himself and then actually make it an eight judiciary sort of case to review. Do you expect that to be the case?
I don't. And we are preparing for every possibility, but I expect that we will be presenting our case in front of the full nine,
Mm.
and we're gonna have to convince them that we are right.
And folks, it has to be printed on January 5th because you say, well, why can't they just wait right before they go to the ballot? A lot of it has to do with the fact that they have to mail them out to a lot of folks who are not in town. For example, our military men and women who are overseas, and they have to be sent to them. So if his name does go on a ballot, they can potentially vote for him. Have you guys talked about the fact what could happen if it goes to the Supreme Court because he gets to stay? And I mean, literally just have to file the paperwork. It's almost undoubted with this right leaning, very political, no matter what they say, Supreme Court, that they don't take up the case. What happens in that context is the people who send their ballots back, like what happens for Colorado, and that if eventually it does get determined that he's not eligible to run, what happens to those ballots?
Yeah, I mean, I think the court is going to be it's going to be hard for the court to avoid this case, assuming it's appealed. And I just saw a report that um, the former president expects to appeal sometime late next week. But also, I think it depends on when the court takes this up and when it renders a decision, like sort of what the impact is on ballots and votes
Mm.
in Colorado. We are going to be prepared to move with all deliberate speed and kind of push the court to do the same, but it's going to be it's going to be a little tight depending on sort of when we have oral argument and when um, ballots obviously will have to go to the printer, but then there's a date when they're sent, and then there's a date when early voting starts. And so, depending on sort of where a decision falls in those various inflection points, will impact sort of what happens on the March 5th primary and how votes are counted or not counted.
Some people say that you are taking away the ability of the people to decide. What is your response to those folks who are out there?
I'd say a couple of things. One, the Constitution doesn't have that many qualifications for office, but as our founding document, it does limit who you can vote for. You can't vote for a 33-year-old. You can't vote for somebody that is not a natural born citizen, regardless of how popular they are. I think Barack Obama, certainly there would be some people who might be interested in voting for him for a third term, but the Constitution says that you can't. People understand those concepts, quite easily. The Constitution also happens to say that you can't engage in an insurrection after taking an oath to support the Constitution, which is what many people believe Donald Trump did, and at least two courts have confirmed that he did. And so, just because the consequences are significant or the stakes are high, and in fact, because the stakes are high, that's when you have to rely on the Constitution. That's why we have a Constitution. That's why we have courts, so that we can have impartial decision making when the stakes are high, as the Colorado Supreme Court said, without fear or and favor. And so, in some ways, it is what it is. But I think that's sort of the abstract argument. The more reality based argument is, like, look at how we got here, right? 80 plus million people voted for somebody else. Donald Trump refused to accept the results of the election. Um, you know. used the big lie targeting black and brown votes in places like Detroit, which obviously made news this week, and Georgia and other places to undermine their votes, attack election workers in their states, recruited and then incited a mob on January 6th, threatened members of Congress of both parties by sending the mob there to be violent, and then sat and did nothing while the Capitol was under siege for 3 hours. We had a witness testify that he was in 2 to 3 hours of hand to hand combat, right? Like, we are here because Donald Trump was anti-democratic. So the idea that enforcing the Constitution against him for the conduct that he engaged in and around January 6th is anti-democratic is just laughable.
Yeah, I mean, you can't vote for Vladimir Putin. You can't vote for Kermit the Frog. You can't be from another country. You can't be imaginary. It's just not whoever you want to run for president. You can't vote for your child who's 17 years old, 25 years old to run for president. So the fact that there have to be some basic things that we agree on. But more importantly, this rule was put in place because after the Civil War, everyone was trying to act like it didn't happen, and we're just coming right back to Congress like everything's a okay, right? It was literally put into to writing because there were traitors amongst us who were trying to go back like business as usual. Like you just can't do that. Along with that, they explicitly, I mean, it's my understanding from limited readings that the senators who were involved in the crafting this language explicitly had the conversation regarding whether or not the president was included in the verbiage. And they were literally, the senator who brought it up was assuaged when it was referenced any officer of the military, and that verbiage was explicit. No,
Yeah, I mean, I never found that argument especially compelling, right? I mean, any civil or military officer, the office of the presidency in the oath is referred to as an office. The presidency is referred, and the president are referred to an office or an officer 25 times within the Constitution. And if the president is not an officer, then what is he or she, right? Like, I always found that
or they.
that particular attack, um, you know, highly unpersuasive. And it's noteworthy. There were three dissents in the decision, but most of the court found that an overwhelming majority of the justices on the Colorado Supreme Court found that argument that we lost on at the district court level just really unpersuasive.
Right, and those arguments are really weak. The three dissenting judges, who were Democrats, dissented more on procedural sort of grounds that they were aiming for. Which your case, I mean, we're looking at some of the other cases that happened across the country, like Kaplan versus Trump in Florida, that failed. There was some sort of procedural components of not being able to demonstrate they were impacted because they were sort of individual citizens. Like so in Florida, Trump was able to prevail in that case because they said, you know what, only other Republican candidates potentially could vie against him. So really, Chris Christie, who's already commented and said he wouldn't, basically demonstrated he would not. But Asa Hutchinson could be someone, as a former candidate who stepped out and bowed out of the race, who could potentially come against him. Liz Cheney, if she were to run, potentially could bring up a case against him in Florida. Then you had Michigan and Minnesota that were both rejected on sort of procedural issues because they were saying basically you can't remove him from the Republican suggested ballot until we actually have the nominee. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, most of the cases that have failed to date have failed on some procedural grounds, either because state law doesn't give voters an opportunity or a path to sue to challenge any presidential candidate or qualification, or because they were in the wrong court, like they didn't have the appropriate
Didn't have
level of
standing.
standing in federal court or something like that. And so, we spent a lot of time thinking about, where and how and when to sue, what some of these procedural questions under state law, the intersection between federal and state law equities, and so we were able to prevail. But as I said, most people sort of see, oh, there was a trial and there was a decision, no, there was an appeal, but there was a long sort of back and forth in the 5 weeks between we filed and when we went to trial. Actually, it was more like 7 or 8 weeks, where we're sort of where we're briefing and arguing these issues. And so, while the only courts to have reached the merits of the question of whether January 6th was an insurrection found that it was, and the only courts to reach the merits of the question of whether Donald Trump is an insurrectionist found that he was. Most of the other cases, or all of the other cases, have fallen short in part because they hit one of these either state law or procedural hurdles.
So, with this decision in hand at this point, are you basically just in a holding pattern, waiting right now to see what the next play is from Trump, which is likely submitting his appeal to the Supreme Court? Is that the gist of it?
Basically, I mean, it's nice to not have to do too much work over Christmas, but especially given how busy this year has been. But yeah, I think we're waiting to see what comes, and we're preparing to answer the bell whenever it does come.
Man, I wish I had some sound effects like ding ding, fun flex bombs that drop on that because
I wish I had some coquito.
yeah. Oh man, we can make that happen. We can make that happen. Shout out to my aunt Minerva who just won the recent Coquito conference and competition in the Bronx and ended up competing on the citywide one, and she got second place on that one. So yeah, we good product.
Respect. I'm gonna text you about that later.
Yeah, we can make that happen. We can make that happen. So
Nice.
folks, so you're basically in a holding pattern. Shout out, name some of the other folks who actually contributed to the case, who other representation, other folks who had the success, because it wasn't just an individual. Like we mentioned some of the litigants, but other folks who helped support you in the case.
Yeah. So we had a great legal team, including the firm of Olson Grimsley, which has three former Supreme Court clerks and the former Solicitor General of Colorado. We had Martha Tierney, the leading sort of Democratic lawyer in the state, and Mario Nicholas, the leading Republican election lawyer in the state. We were supported by amicus briefs from Mark Graber and Gerard Magliocca, who's a witness in the case, who are the sort of two leading scholars on these issues. We had these great witnesses, including two law enforcement officers, Danny Hodges and Winston Panjan, who testified. Bill Banks, who's an expert in presidential authority, Peter Simi, who's an expert in political violence, and then a series of amicus briefs from organizations and allies, including Common Cause, in New Mexico, the NAACP State Conference of New Mexico, Carol Anderson, and others who were willing to, write briefs to support our client's case, and some of the leading First Amendment scholars in the country, including Floyd Abrams, Erwin Chemerinsky, Martha Minow, and others, who were willing to again support this litigation with briefs on very specific issues that we thought was important to get in front of the court.
Yeah, like I said, I'm super proud of you. Congratulations to Crew Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington. Did a fantastic job on this. But we have to really get onto the most important issues, which is, do you think, this is serious, do you think the Knicks have a chance in the playoffs?
No.
Oh, that was a very
Yeah,
quick.
I mean, come on,
You
like,
didn't even no pro.
like,
Like
like this is
loaded.
like this isn't even like I'll put it this way. This isn't even about the Knicks, but you saw Becky Hammond was getting some grief, saying Jalen Brunson isn't a number one guy. I tend to agree, right? Like, at best they have a bunch of high twos, but you need a
He
you
can't be
need
a
a
one
guy.
B. He can't be a one
You,
B.
I mean, I don't think you can win with a 1B. I mean, look at what Jimmy Butler has done, right? Like, Jimmy is great, but Jimmy's not a number one. He's not a 1A. Like, I would put him as a
Ooh.
1B guy. Um, like sometimes you need two ones, right? Like, this is the theory of the case with Dame in Milwaukee. And so, like, I just don't know that they have enough firepower to make it through the gauntlet to get to the NBA title. And, like, look, they can probably beat the Sixers if they play hard enough, because the Sixers are going to Sixers.
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
But
whoa, 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 whoa,
come on
whoa,
now,
whoa,
come on now.
whoa!
Nobody's putting any faith in the Sixers.
Put some
I'm not saying
respect on
that.
that. Put
I'm not
some
saying they
respect on
would
the
be
Sixers'
favored to
name.
beat the Sixers,
Embiid and
but
Maxi is a beast. Maxi is a one B. Maxi is definitely a one.
Maxi is coming up. Yeah, I mean,
He's a
look,
one B, and he and definitely Joel is a one A.
you telling me that Joel Embiid is a 1A?
I am telling you, he's a one A. More importantly, his conditioning has been terrible. He just needs to be healthy. He needs
Okay.
to be healthy, and he needs to have a clear, because what's been happening is people have been not been elevating Maxi to the proper role and sort of waiting on what's his name? J. Cole lookalike, mixed with Maxwell that had a baby. Who's their
Oh, what's his name? The Tobias Harris.
Tobias Harris? They've been waiting for him to step up and be that 1B, and sort of he's been occupying that space. But now he's relegated to be that second or third option. I think that's what the team needs to do. And running that offense through Maxi when Joel is
Mm.
tired and off the bench is the way to go. Maybe even intermittently letting Maxwell come off. Slash J. Cole's baby come off of the bench might be a solution. But I don't think letting him start, or in those playoffs, at least in the playoffs, because the rotation gets tighter and they don't really have enough support coming off of the bench in terms of offensive output. But definitely put some respect on their name, man. Put some respect.
I mean, let's put it this way. All I'm saying is the Knicks are at best fourth in the East. No, like that's their ceiling.
Yeah, yeah. What? So you're putting them up there with? Are you putting the Pacers in the top four?
I mean, we'll see. Like
You hedged on that one really quick.
of course I hedged on that really quickly because
They've been sliding.
you and I know I picked the Pacers number 3. We'll see how that plays out. If Halliburton
I don't think they'll play too good.
can stay healthy, but all I'm saying is that the best that the Knicks can be is 4. They're not better than the Sixers. They're not better than the Bucks. They're not better
The Celtics.
the um than the Celtics. Now, if you're telling me that, like, I'll put it this way, I wouldn't bet money on them beating the Pacers, nor would I bet money on them beating the Heat. So, like, are they, like, if they finish top 4, could they finish top 4? Sure. Could they finish top 3? Maybe. Do I expect them to get to the NBA Finals? Absolutely not. Would I be shocked if they made the Eastern Conference Finals? You would be too.
I would be. I wouldn't. I wouldn't expect that from them. I think it's possible if they have a favorable matchup. Like if they get to the point where they face the Celtics specifically, and they're
Mhm.
just defensively. I don't know what's happening with Mitchell Robinson with his injury. If he's actually when he's going to come back. I don't have a timeline for that just yet. But if they're able to be the big-bodied and rebounders and defensive beasts, because the Celtics are really, they're just too thirsty for threes. And they don't. They have
Mhm.
their individual matchups are so great, and yet they for some reason fall back on shooting threes because this is the modern NBA. So rather than playing real basketball, they take the AAU lazy way out.
Not
Which
everybody
is
can be Steph Curry.
they're literally no one can be Steph Curry, literally
I
except for
I
Steph
agree
Curry.
with you. I
So
agree with you. Like this whole change the game mode is like, I guess it makes sense in the abstract, but like ain't nobody can shoot it like him, and so I don't know why so many people are falling in love with that. But
which is the problem with Klay Thompson. He thinks
mm,
he can be. He might very well be the second best shooter in the league. Maybe he could be in a conversation with a couple years ago. Maybe not today. What are your thoughts on the Suns then?
I mean, it's just to be TBD, right? Like have the 3 of them played yet together
I want to
beyond those
say
8 minutes?
I want to say yeah I want to say it's been less than a game or 2 games or something like that before one of them
Yeah,
has been
I
injured.
mean, look, I'll put it this way: classic, not number one guy, Bradley Beal, right? Big numbers on terrible teams. He's not a number one guy. I don't even know if he's a number two guy, right? Like, and I don't know that it works as him with him as a number three guy because he thinks he's a number one. But we'll see.
I think the bigger problem is they didn't decide who's the closer. And
Right.
for me, that is Durant, who has the demonstrated success. Yeah, I think there was a lot of people falling in love with the way that D Book looked in the playoffs. He was like perfect, shooting lights out, which for a couple of games before he reverted back to that meme with Doncic looking at him and like during the free
Yeah.
throw.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It like it's weird that somebody else would even think that they are the number one option on a team that includes Kevin Durant.
it's a lot of
I
ego.
mean,
It's a lot of ego.
like I'll put it this way, right? Like Steph didn't act like the number one option when he was on the team with Kevin Durant, and Steph is objectively better than Booker.
Very much so. I
Now,
mean, track
KD is
record.
older now, but still,
I mean, I'm not hating on D Book shot, but offensively, it's just, I mean, you could make an argument for Steph in the final moments, except for the fact that he's maybe hit only one buzzer beater in his whole career. Other than that, I mean, like, how many clutch
I
shots
mean,
has?
it's okay to be a number two guy. Like, I mean, Paul George, who I like a lot, like made this point last year. He's like, I'm the number two guy. Kawhi is our guy. I'm okay with that. And like being able to say that publicly does a lot of good for like team dynamics,
In the
right?
franchise? Yep.
Yeah.
Being able to
Now,
recruit
if
other
they can stay
players.
healthy,
Yeah, yeah, I know. Yeah. I'm not between. I mean, they have like one knee between the two of them, one
Yeah.
functional leg between Kawhi and Paul George, and it's never seemed to be at the same time. So,
I would love to see that series.
Suns versus
I mean,
Clippers.
maybe they should hold it tomorrow since everybody is healthy, like
Yeah.
right now.
If they make it to the
But
playoffs, literally, there's no.
yeah,
If I had to take the over under on whether all five of those players will be in the playoffs in the same
come
game,
on
like
now.
no, it's just
Yeah, no,
mathematically
that's
highly
unworkable,
unlikely.
man.
It's like expecting Chris Paul to be healthy in the playoffs. I can't do it.
Yeah, just can't do
All right, well, I want to thank you for your time. Anything else you want to let the folks know? Any other
it.
words of
Nah,
wisdom
you
to
know,
impart?
I'll just end on, democracy is work. And, and if if good people sort of cede democracy to folks like Donald Trump who are intent on destroying it, on canceling the Constitution, and lying about you know voting and pretty much everything else, like we're gonna lose it. And so, it's up to us. You got to look in the mirror, do what you can. And I'm just glad to help our clients who looked in the mirror and did what they can.
Thank you to you. Thank you to all the folks out there who tuned with us. Thank you to Stuart Levy in the back. Drop WRFU up here by the 104.5 FM. Gonna go ahead and fade out and go ahead and give us the outro for all the folks. Again, if you want to give us feedback, you can always contact us at WRFU at the show 1045.com. WRFU at the show 1045.com. As always, never too good for criticism. Definitely deserving of it. But again, appreciate all the time and support, all the folks out there in Radio Land. Shout out to you guys. Shout out to, again, Stuart Levy. Shout out to DJ BJ Clark and all the folks out there who helped and support. Deuces.
Merry Christmas, man.
Likewise, brother. Peace.